Hello, Chair. Your meeting is now live.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Well, welcome everybody to this meeting of the Partnership for South Hampshire. The first item I have is apologies for absence, so any changes in the joint committee membership. So I'm not aware of any changes in membership, but Astra, if you'd like to give the latest update on any apologies, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I have apologies from Councillor Keith House and Councillor David Airy is here as deputy, and I believe I have also an apology from Jill Neller, and I believe it's Jade Ellis is here deputising.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. The next item on the agenda is the minutes of the last meeting. These are on pages 5 to 12. That was the meeting held on the 25th of January. So can I just ask if anybody has any issue with those minutes, please say now, or we shall take them as accepted. Okay, not seeing anybody, not seeing any hands, so we'll take the minutes as accepted. The item 3 is Chairman's announcements. I don't have any specific announcements other than to note that, of course, this is the last meeting of probably the most bizarre municipal year that any of us have ever encountered. Certainly for my, whatever it is, 35 years as a Fareham Borough Councillor, I've never known a year like it, and I'm sure that's the same for all of us. So thank you for all of your forbearance, all that you have done to help the democratic process keep on running, and I wish you all luck, those that are restanding in elections. Obviously I wish some more luck than others, but luck all the same. Public service isn't something that is quite as easy as some may like to suggest it is. And also anybody that may not be restanding, obviously the best of luck to you for the future, and thank you for all that you have done for your communities. The next item is declarations of interest. Does anybody have any interest they wish to declare? Okay, I see no interest at all. So next is deputations, item 5. We have no deputations, so we therefore move on to the Partnership for South Hampshire Managers Report. This is page 13 to 16. Paddy, if you'd like to deal with this, please. I know there are no decisions to be made on this one. It is all for noting, but if there are any comments you'd like to make, please do.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. So to confirm, this report is for items that don't warrant a report in their own right, and the Part A items for decision. And as the Chairman said, there are no items for decision in this report. And Part B are the items for information. In terms of the information, we've got the usual key performance indicators for Bird Aware Solent, detailing sort of like social media and site visits and so forth. There's then a sort of a series of elements which effectively are picked up through the rest of the agenda, and then there are some additional other items that we've put on the report. One of them concerns the details of the Levelling Up Fund and the Community Renewal Fund. Just a slight clarification on this. In the Levelling Up Fund, we say all local authorities are allowed to submit a number of bids for the number of MPs they've got. That relates to the district councils. In addition, transport authorities are allowed, transport authorities are also allowed to submit a bid as well. We also, within that, we'll be looking to develop a narrative for the Solent to support the overall bids that different authorities will be putting forward, and the Isle of Wight are leading on some work on that. We detail some work that the DEFRA are doing around a new test and trial for the Environmental Land Management Scheme, and a number of different push authorities are on the steering group that are sort of like taking that work forward, and that work is sort of like fundamentally is due to finish by October this year and started in December. And I think the final bit to say is, as we move out of COVID lockdown, we clearly have a chance to review how we operate and the way we do things, and that will sort of push, I think, need to do that along with other authorities. And as part of that, the chief executives are going to review the work of the sort of boards and the various forums that operate within the Solent area, and then report back. So that's all I've got in the report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Well, that one is for noting. If anybody wishes to comment on or query any of it, please indicate now. Don't see any. Okay, I'll take it that report is noted. That moves us on to item 7, and this starts on page 17 of your agenda papers, and this is an update on progress to date against the approved budget. That's for the 2020-2021 financial year, and then setting out the proposed revenue budget for 2021-2022. There is a slight typo on just above paragraph 8. It should of course be 2021-2022 budget, and that is what the proposals are for. We do have John Evans with us. So John, if you're there, is there anything you wish to draw to our attention before we look at the recommendations?
No, I suppose you covered it quite succinctly. So it's just to provide an update on the budget monitoring position for this financial year, which is broadly on track. At the January meeting, there was a separate paper on the culture, creative industries and built environment panel, which included some financial approvals. So they've been reflected here in the budget monitoring position and also in the budget for next financial year. In terms of the budget for next financial year, as part of the current business plan for the partnership, the core costs are funded by the partner contributions. So we're proposing to maintain those at the same level as last financial year, and then any work that partners may do within the financial year are picked up by the individual authorities involved, or the unallocated balances of the partnership, which are effectively the cash reserves held by the partnership. So what is presented here is a summary position. It includes what the forecast unallocated balances will be at the end of 21-22. The following item on the agenda is a request for funding. Those figures aren't currently included in this paper, but if it is approved, that would be funded from the partnership's unallocated balances.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, John. Any members have any queries on this report? And I'll be relying on Astra to tell me if there are any hands going up, because I can only see 6 faces on the screen at once. Okay, I don't see any. Then we move to the recommendations. There are 4, 2 of them for noting the position for 2020-2021, and then to approve the proposed revenue budget for 21-22 and partner contributions as set out in table 5. So I will take that those are all agreed unless somebody shouts very loudly now. Okay, that's done, thank you. Next item, item 8, is the green print for South Hampshire, a piece of work that has been ongoing. This is covered on pages 23 to 28 of your agenda. And we have Alison Barnes from the New Forest National Park Authority with us today, Simon Eaton from the Southern Policy Centre, and you're going to introduce this report between you.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members. Good evening, Chairman. Hopefully it's self-explanatory, and thank you to Jonathan for the little preview there in his last report. But you'll recall at our last meeting in January, we presented the green print for South Hampshire to members, and this shared social, environmental and economic framework for green recovery was broadly endorsed by the authorities on the partnership, which was fantastic. And this gave us a real focus for some wider collaboration, and you'll recall we agreed to broaden the discussion to some other authorities, in particular to the Isle of Wight and west towards Portsmouth and Christchurch and Poole, but also with business leaders. And also I can report that we've been doing that as well with colleagues working on the Freeport bid, as well as some national colleagues at the LGA. So Simon, I believe, will give you a bit of feedback on some of that. We also agreed that we would be looking to flesh out the outcomes for the 5 priorities. to look at projects already underway and also look at potential projects, and also how we would measure progress and key performance indicators. So obviously we haven't done all that since January, but we have got an update for you. But it's become apparent, obviously, that to do all of that, we do require some resources. So this report seeks some financial support from Partnership South Hampshire. And this is very much to complement what we've already had into the partnership from a range of partners, which Simon is going to run through, not least Southern Policy Centre, the National Park Authority, and universities of both Southampton and Portsmouth. So I'm going to hand over to Simon to just give you an outline of what we hope to achieve with the resources that we are requesting this evening. Simon.
Alison, thank you. And thanks, Chair, and evening members and colleagues. As Alison says, it's quite reassuring and quite heartening how much traction this project has gained over time, and the real positive support out there for doing something about reassessing the balance between the economy, our environment and our communities. It's very timely for a lot of people, I think. Members have seen a couple of reports on this to date, and the report you have before you today or this evening outlines the work that's to be done to further develop this into a very clear framework that members can use to collaborate, to plan together, and to measure the progress they're making in delivering the shared priorities that are encapsulated in the 5 priorities that we talked about and members endorsed at our last meeting. As Alison says, the work to date has received quite a lot of cash and in-kind support already, notably from the New Forest National Park Authority, from the University of Southampton, who've put some cash, probably about £15,000 into this. And a lot of in-kind support from, again, the Park Authority, 2 universities and others as well, probably at least matching that cash contribution, I would think. What's interesting is the amount of interest in projects that are running parallel to this and spinning out of this as well. I touch in the report on one that Terence O'Rourke are funding to look at business perspectives of the concept of a green recovery, that rebalancing of environment, society and economy. There are other university research projects developing along these lines already. And as Alison says, we've had a couple of interesting conversations with people locally, like Business South, but also nationally with the LGA, and I mentioned that last time. The real interest in what's happening down in South Hampshire. The request we put forward, £20,000 from the unallocated resources, as John says, would allow us to give us the capacity and the resources to continue to do the various things outlined, to develop that framework further, to deliver the workshops we talk about, notably a workshop on data to make sure we've got a really robust way of measuring progress, which is absolutely consistent with the data, the information that councils and others are already collecting, rather than creating a whole new framework. We think communication is an important part of this as well, both telling the story of what we've done to date and bringing people into the ongoing development. Members will have seen the record of the discussion we had at the Overview and Scrutiny Committee a couple of weeks back, where they believe it's a real priority to produce something which is, if you like, for public consumption in terms of describing what the green print is about and what it might mean to our communities. And I think that's a really good idea, and that ought to be one of our top communication priorities as well. And then, of course, some resource to just provide for the continual overall management of this and coordination of the various different strands of work that have been brought together. We suggested in the report that the steering group, which we're looking to grow slightly to bring in other local authorities and other partners as well in the Push area and perhaps beyond, to include notably the Isle of Wight. The steering group should be the people who keep tabs on this expenditure, together with the other resource that's coming in, the cash in kind, if you like, as well as any contributions that we would expect to lever out of others who take part in this project. There's great enthusiasm for coming on board with this, and it shouldn't be a free ride. They should put their 2 pennies in, quite literally, to the budget as well. So members, Alison and I are happy to answer any questions you may have about the amounts, progress with the project, or where we'd envisage this money being spent. So back to you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much indeed to both Alison and Simon for making that presentation to us and summarising the report this evening. Having had a look through the report, I think it probably would be helpful, you've touched on some of this anyway, Simon, but just so members can get a full understanding of where the money is coming from and to where it is going, I think it might be useful if a little table was produced. I know you've talked about helping kind as well as helping cash, but it is a significant sum of extra money that we are being asked for, so I think that understanding would be helpful if you wouldn't mind. Maybe it's something that if you let Astra have it, it could go out with the minutes of the meeting so people can just understand what is coming into this and from where. First I've got on my list is Councillor Michael Wilson, please, from Havant.
Thank you, Chair. The Chair's covered to a degree my question, which is probably a bit of an obvious one, but really who are the other organisations that you anticipate funds from? And the second question is, how much do you think the support programme will cost overall, so we have an idea of what our contribution is going to fund?
I can make a start on both of those, Chair. The money that's already come in, I mentioned we've had £10,000 from the University of Southampton, which covered the salary costs of a postgraduate student who came under their doctoral training programme. They're paid a salary when they do that, over and above whatever research grant or other funding they have. And that was about 10,000 for something like 3 months worth of, extended 4 months actually, 4 months worth of work. My cost of my time in terms of project management has been supported by the National Park today to the tune of about £5,000. You've had significant time from Alison in her role as chairing the project group thus far, from academics at Southampton and Portsmouth universities, and we almost never mention the time that your own office has put into this as well. I think we can also expect to, and we will certainly encourage people to put additional funding in from partners who come on board, as I said. A sort of quick calculation in my head, and I can refine this in the table that the Chair's just asked for as well, but a quick calculation in my head suggests that to get us to the point where we've got, if you like, a functioning framework and a clear understanding of how we can all use it, and we're monitoring progress, etc., etc. The cash contributions and then the in-kind added to that as well is probably going to take us towards £75,000–80,000, I would think, maybe a little bit more. That's a bit of a finger in the air, Councillor, but I think it's that sort of order of magnitude. So 25% odd of that from push is around the right ballpark to think of, I think. But I don't know if Alison wants to add anything to that.
The only thing I would add, thank you, Simon, is that we would expect to lever in additional funds for partners who wish to use the framework significantly. So we've already talked about the Freeport bid this evening. I'm pleased to report, and I know Brian Johnson is on the call, that the green print was very much a part of that expression of interest, which we now know obviously was successful. Clearly, we want to see the green print really working through that proposal as it turns into a business case. And that will, of course, take investment from, that project. So as different elements are picked up of our joint approach to green recovery from different sectors and from different projects, I would imagine it also pulling in further resources to operationalise and make happen on the ground the aspirations that we've signed up to. So that's the only additional thing I would say to Simon. Clearly, by the end of this financial year, I think it says this in the paper, we want to have a fully operational green print. So we would have a number of things. So one of them is hopefully this publicly accessible guide to what it is, and possibly some kind of resource such as a film or some other kind of resource that we could all use to communicate about it. We would also have a toolkit to use the framework for different sectors, and we would have a number of tools and ways of understanding how we would use it. So this time next year, I would expect not just ourselves, but a number of partners from business and elsewhere to be able to use this framework in their day-to-day work. Certainly in the New Forest, I would hope that many of our communities could be using it in some of the work that they're doing locally. So our job is to really use these resources to make that a reality in the number of ways that we've described.
Chair, if I could just add one more thought that occurred to me while Alison was talking. I mentioned the interest in the universities for sort of research programmes which link in with this, and there's already 2 or 3 bids being developed for additional research resources on this sort of topic, the behavioural change, the role of businesses, environmental protection, etc., etc. So again, there's a sort of trickle-down effect, or there's perhaps not quite the right word, but it's generating additional spend on a similar sort of research area and policy area from other organisations as well, which is worth us collectively claiming a bit of credit for, that we persuaded people to spend money on these things that matter to us in our area as well.
Okay. All right, thank you. Anybody else like to ask anything? Okay, then in that case, the recommendation is that we agree a contribution of £20,000 from our unallocated resources to support the programme to develop the green print for South Hampshire. Looking around, see if anybody please object if you wish to object, otherwise I will take it as agreed. Right, and that one is agreed. So that is item 8. We now move to item 9, which is the statement of common ground, and this is looking a little bit different for us, not at housing. This is looking at commercial needs, logistics, etc., and a study which is being carried out there. So if you would like to find page 29, we should have a number of people here, I think, involved with this one. Claire Upton-Brown from the chairman of the Bush Planning Officers Group, Mike Allgrove, and also Richard Pestle from Stantec. So, Claire, are you starting with this?
I am, thank you. So the report sets out the findings of the work that's been commissioned on economy, employment and commercial needs, including logistics, and the work has been undertaken by Stantec. The headlines of the findings of the work that's been carried out by Stantec is that there is an overall need for industrial and warehousing development of 168 hectares. In addition, it suggested that we need to look for up to 5 new sites for large logistics warehousing, and there's an overall aspiration for need for office development in the region of 390,000 square metres. And the reason why we've referenced it as aspirational is that the evidence is just suggesting that because of rental income, that there is an issue around viability, which in part has seen low delivery of office floor space over the preceding years. So the study will inform the next discussion that the Planning Officers Group will have, which will be looking at potential sites to meet the commercial criteria. This work will then inform the joint strategy going forward. I just want to emphasise at this point that whilst the planning officers will look at how the potential logistics need can be accommodated across the bush area, it isn't for the joint strategy to allocate land. That is for the local plans, individual local plans. I'd also like to point out to the committee this evening that whilst when we appointed the consultants, Stantec, they were aware of the potential for a Freeport bid. The current work doesn't include any reference to Freeport, We are conscious of the Freeport bid and will do further work, or further work will be commissioned by Stantec should that be necessary at a later stage. But at this point, the next steps will be just to look at the outcome of the study that's currently being carried out and to look at how that might be distributed across the area. So the report is for noting, and I'll now pause and ask for any questions or points of clarification that the committee might want. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Claire. Obviously, there's quite a chunky report, which I'm sure members have diligently read. And the first one who'd like to ask a question is Councillor David Airy from Eastleigh. David.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to ask a question on this. Claire's answered one of my questions for certain, and that was about the planning officers group trying to identify sites for these warehouses across the area, and I'm pleased that she has made the point that it'll actually be up to the local plan sites and so on within the individual district and borough and city authorities to actually locate the site. But how sort of the first part of my question is how sort of detailed in the suggestion of locations will the planning officers group make that? She then went on to talk and say it didn't make any reference to the Freeport, and I was also rather expecting her to say that it would make reference to the Freeport and that the sites might be appropriate to Freeport areas. And I wonder if she'd like to comment on that. And the final part of my question is, in terms of thinking of transportation to and from these sites, once they're identified, hopefully perhaps the planning officers groups can look to see if there's at least one site that could be rail connected to try and keep the number of lorries and so on off the road. And if she'd like to comment on that, please, that'd be really helpful.
Okay, if I come in and then I might call on some additional support from Mike and Richard, the consultant from Stantec. So first of all, in terms of how we're going to go about identifying the sites, there will be a workshop held with the planning officers group, which we will look at the potential opportunities for sites, and we'll actually seek to identify broad areas. So again, we won't be actually identifying them down to the minutiae because that's not appropriate at this level, but we will be looking for broad areas where these sites meet certain criteria. So there will be sites that are geographically connected well to transport links. Probably other criteria such as it'd be useful if they're flat, if you're looking for large warehouse sites that don't impact negatively on our landscape, and there will be some other sort of high-level criteria that we will apply working through the planning officers group to try and identify potentially 5 sites that could accommodate this scale of development in a satisfactory manner. In terms of the Freeport areas, so some of the potential tax sites as part of the Freeport bid are already allocated within current local plans or indeed have planning permissions. So we're all aware that Dunsbury already has a permission. Some of the sites within the New Forest area either have planning permissions or are identified in the current local plan. So we are very aware of the need for the bid and this piece of work to speak to each other, and indeed the wider work of the joint strategy, because we may need to revisit some other elements such as the distribution of housing should the Freeport bid be successful. What we will be discussing with the LEP in the near future is the overall floor space numbers identified in the bid, and how much additionality there is and how much is already allocated through either local plans or planning permissions. So that discussion will be taking place, and it may well be that there is some additional work that we will need to commission Stantec to do to reflect the Freeport bid in this work that we're currently doing. And your third question was around the connection with transport infrastructure, which obviously is critical, because if we are going to plan our area well, we can't plan it just on a spatial basis. It has to be supported by infrastructure. And I'm going to actually pass over to Mike, because he's had some very, very detailed discussions with our transport colleagues. So Mike will be able to give a more detailed response as to the discussions around the interrelationship between this work and the transport infrastructure. So Mike, over to you.
Thank you, Claire. I'll just make one point in terms of the need for warehousing. This is a strategic need. It's not really any need for any one authority. It's a need for the South Hampshire as a whole, which is why we're looking at what the most suitable sites are across South Hampshire as a whole, albeit that they then have to be potentially allocated through local plans. In terms of your point about a rail connection, at the moment we have very broad criteria looking at where suitable sites may be, because I don't think there are many, or certainly not many obvious ones. So we've got very, very high level criteria to see where they might be. But I think that's the issue of a rail connection is very important. And if there are any sites that have that potential, then that's probably going to make them much more favourable than others, subject to, you know, if it's actually physically possible, not just with a rail connection, but to actually put all the infrastructure in as well to make that a functioning one.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully those answers were helpful to you, David. Any other questions from anyone? Okay, I don't see any, so that report was for noting. Oh, there we are. Brian, you're going to tell us how it would affect the Freeport here.
Thank you, Chairman. I was just going to add that, that picking up on Claire's comments, obviously with the tax sites, as I think a number of you know, because a number of you sit on the stakeholder group and the working group, we have put in a proposal about tax sites, but of course the point of the next phase is to do a full business case to actually justify them. So what we've put in so far is an indication of what tax sites we have suggested, rather than the end game of what those tax sites will necessarily be, because it's going to be dependent on a number of things that all of you are going to be involved with, the government's acceptance of them, of the deliverability of them, and several other aspects. So it's just to remember that these things are still not set in stone, so we need to be careful that we don't sort of give the impression that it's a done deal, both for your own stakeholders, because we haven't been public for some of the local the public about precisely where all the tax sites are, and for the government stakeholders. So it was just that sort of word of caution, but I can see Claire nodding, so I think she's with that.
I'm absolutely with that, and I was answering that question quite carefully.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Brian. Okay, then I will take it that report is noted. Okay, and now we come to our final item on the agenda this evening, which is an update on the old chestnut of the nutrient neutrality situation in South Hampshire. Of course, this is one that has been appearing on every agenda for a few years now. Very significant issues. Of course, they have had a great impact on our ability to enable the development and delivery of new homes in South Hampshire. And for that reason, I know a number of us failed housing delivery tests. So not only do we have inappropriately high housing targets to start with, we then get slapped with another 20% for the next 5 years as well, which is absolutely crazy. So I know certainly in Fareham we've seen our housing figures go up from the government's proposed amendments to its housing calculation algorithm by a cool 50%, 50% increase in housing requirement in Fareham. I know that the push Scrutiny Committee, Overview and Scrutiny Committee, did consider nutrients again at its last meeting and sent a little note through to us saying we need to push ministers and do what we can. Well, we certainly have been doing what we can. I did ensure that responses have been circulated to push members, so you are aware of the, what I'd probably say was a somewhat unhelpful latest response from Christopher Pincher, the relevant minister, which really did nothing to help. The government knocked off a month for COVID, but nothing for 2 years of an inability to develop. So we have with us this evening David Bibby and Simon Kennedy. So I'll pass over to David first to see whether there's anything you would like to add or comment upon within your report.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Again, I'm here for a further update on this issue. But you mentioned the change this time is it's now a joint report prepared between myself and Simon Kennedy as the Strategic Environmental Planning Officer, and he's been post since mid-December, and it's his work which is now the focus on taking joint solutions forward. So if I may, if I give sort of a general overview of the key background work, and then Simon can talk about the work streams he's now embarking upon in moving forward for the course of this year. So firstly, the £2 million loan from the Getting Building Fund, which is being channeled through the Solent LEP to the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust. The Wildlife Trust are currently in the final stages of completing the purchase of their second site on the Isle of Wight. And if this purchase is successfully completed, then the site has the potential to provide up to 3,000 kilograms of total nitrogen. Obviously, this isn't a solution for all push authorities, but it does help a number of partner authorities. The discussions on a potential wastewater treatment permit review, which we've been pushing for some time, both the review of existing permit limits for nitrates where they exist, and also the introduction of permit limits where they don't exist on the larger treatment works in the mainland, which discharge into rivers. Following a meeting between director level between the Environment Agency and Natural England under the auspices of DEFRA, there's been a positive outcome for that meeting towards the end of January, and the Environment Agency has now confirmed that a review will take place. And crucially, this is a targeted review of permits in the Solent. So the focus is on the Solent, but it may also have implications for locations nationally that are also affected by excessive nutrient issues in due course. But crucially, it's not now held up with a national review. It will be a Solent focused review. Natural England will also be consulted on the scope of the review going forward. At the moment, we don't yet have a timetable from the Environment Agency, who are considering the timescale and resource requirements, because it is a significant piece of work which will take some time to complete. But they have undertaken to keep the partnership up to date in that moving forward. I think this is a very positive first step in taking a review forward. Clearly, we don't know the outcome, but it will take some time. But I think we can be optimistic that hopefully there'll be a positive outcome when the findings are done. And also the hope is that it will be completed in time for the next 5-year investment period for Southern Water to be agreed through the Environment Agency with Ofwat, which will be for the investment period 2025 to 2030 for implementation, but which need to be agreed by 2024. We just missed the current period, which was from 2020, which needed to be agreed in 2019. Further to that, the Southern Water voluntary monitoring, which members will remember, will be undertaken for a year as at April. So again, this is the larger treatment works that don't currently have a permit limit. And the initial results are therefore expected in the spring, once that 1 year's monitoring has been completed. And through the Water Quality Working Group, discussions have been taking place with stakeholders around an agreed methodology for how these results should be interpreted, led by Southern Water, the Environment Agency and Natural England. And then it will be for the local authorities to decide what to do with this information and what weight it can be given in the context of Natural England's advice and their methodology for calculating nutrient budgets, and also for Natural England to decide whether they review their methodology and advice in the light of the outcome. Chairman, you mentioned the engagement with government, and I'll pass on to Simon in a moment to talk about his contacts in that regard. But as you mentioned, unfortunately, there's still been no relief on the requirements and the burdens on us regarding housing land supply or in the housing delivery test requirements. But we do continue to engage on this issue, and I'll hope that there's a possibility the government's position could be reconsidered going forward. And also, we are moving forward with the DEFRA funded £3.9 million pilot online trading platform, and that also continues the stakeholder engagement phase at the moment. So if I now may pass over to Simon to give an overview of the work that he's been doing to date and the scope of his work going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Chairman and members. So as David intimated, just before Christmas, I started in this role, and as part of the structure of the role, a steering group has been set up to help guide my work. That steering group is now fully formed with Mark Williams of New Forest District Council and David Bibby as Chair and Vice Chair respectively. There's 10 local planning authorities represented in that steering group, so a good selection of the member authorities that support my role. As part of the work already undertaken in the new year, the steering group has agreed a project plan for my work moving forward, and the first part of that project plan was substantive stakeholder engagement to go back and look at all of the stakeholders, including DEFRA, the Environment Agency, Natural England, of course the local planning authorities, and the providers of mitigation land as well. And that work is substantively complete. The first round of that consultation process, over 40 meetings over the course of January and into February. And the stakeholder engagement process did highlight a number of items to note. The first one is that there's over 30 potential nitrogen mitigation sites across the region or sub-region that have been or are currently being investigated by stakeholders. And there's 6 mitigation schemes that are supporting new development already in place at this time. And they're a mix between local authority schemes, the Hampshire and Isle of Wight schemes, and some private third-party schemes that are coming through the system. There is still a lot of different approaches in the market, the consultation has shown, with landowners and mitigation providers still being talked to by a lot of different stakeholders. And to be honest, there was some excitement within the market of potential mitigation providers looking at the initial values attached to nitrogen credits. That continues to a certain extent, but we are seeing signs that it's starting to stabilise slightly. The initial assessment is that the eastern side of the region, and that's particularly development that drains either, my role is supported by Chichester, so the Chichester catchment, or development served by both Bud's Farm and Peel Common wastewater treatment works. The indication at this time is that there is going to be enough mitigation coming forward to satisfy the need for development into the medium term. That's over the next 7 years or so, essentially until the next round of the sewage undertaker funding has been assessed. It suffice to say that to the west of those wastewater treatment works, any development to the west of the development that would serve Peel Common, mitigation sites are coming forward, but coming forward more slowly, with lower certainty that there is going to be enough credit still coming through the system in order to satisfy the need for development that drains essentially through to the Teston Itchen and southern New Forest area. That being said, there is still mitigation sites coming forward on a regular basis that I'm becoming aware of. And the next step in the project plan is to look at all of the sites that are what we are aware of, and start to see which ones may be supported or which ones may form the basis of a pilot scheme. And I hope to be able to report back into Joint Committee at the next session in June as to whether or not there's suitable pilot schemes, or indeed if there is a need for a pilot scheme led by a consortium of local authorities. I'll be doing this in the intervening months by essentially engaging with local authorities on a catchment-wide basis. Although I have a strategic role, it is very much a catchment specific issue to each catchment, which has different issues. So that's the work that I'll be continuing to do over the next couple of months. And of course, continuing to engage with all of the relevant stakeholders, including DEFRA and their pilot scheme, and indeed emerging complementary schemes such as the Green Print for South Hampshire potentially, or the Environmental Land Management Scheme, which is a national scheme looking at different management strategies. So busy first few months and some substantive work undertaken, but still some work to do to be able to form a recommendation as to pilot schemes, or indeed to give further information on the supply and demand of development and nitrogen mitigation land. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. Anybody got any comments? Anything they'd like to say? Okay,
Chairman,
sorry, I've just seen Michael Wilson.
Well, I suppose, thank you, Chair. It's really a comment, because it seemed to me, reading through the notes, that, and I think Simon sort of confirmed it to a degree, that there's a danger of just creating a sort of bonanza for those sitting on poor quality farmland in the right region, which could actually have a real effect on the affordability of the scheme, and therefore feed into development. And we may end up with a situation where it's quite difficult, certainly for smaller developers, which is counterproductive to the whole purpose of having the scheme in the first place.
Okay, thank you. Stephen Philpott.
Yes, thank you very much, Jim. Sorry, I don't have a hand-raising facility somehow on this evening. I can never quite work out this IT stuff. Sometimes when I switch it on, I have a hand-raising facility. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I have a chat facility. Sometimes I don't. Never mind. I should personally just a couple of observations and questions, if I may, Chairman. And it's one of those subjects, I think, just when you think you've got to grips with it, you think you understand it, and something comes up, and I don't fully, and I'm not sure I fully do. I was given to understand that with this nitrogen, leaching into the soil and so on, that it really didn't matter whereabouts in the sub-region the issue was, that it all went into the same solent area. So therefore, I'm surprised we're seeing now that things are divided into the east and west, and that we've got an explanation that somehow or other there's a difference between mitigation on the east of the region, sub-region, and in the west of the sub-region. Perhaps somebody could help me out with that one. But the other thing that struck me, Chairman, is at paragraph 20 of the report. It says that a number of government agencies, including DEFRA, Environment Agency, Natural England, and communities and local government, it says here, continue to be invited to POG meetings. But it doesn't say whether they go to the meetings. And paragraph 10 it indicates that out of the 40 meetings with government agencies such as DEFRA, Environment Agency, and Natural England, the one that's missing from that group appears to be the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. Given your comment, Chairman, that Mr. Pincher, who is indeed a minister, a housing minister in the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, has written you such a lovely letter just recently, which we were shown at the last meeting. given that, that presumably the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, which is his department, were invited to some of these, or most of these, or all of these 40 meetings, and they don't appear, according to this report, an assumption here, to have turned up to any of them, then are we able to do anything differently that we can, that perhaps can encourage somebody from MHCLG to actually turn up to one of these meetings so that we can discuss the very matters that you raised, I think, pertinently at the top of this item. The next thing is paragraph 22, just an open question really, and that is it says here, second to last line, that there are a number of key considerations still to be dealt with. Just wondered if any chance you just if either Mr. Kennedy or Mr. Bibby could expand a little on that and say what those key considerations still to be dealt with may be. I think I'd probably know what they might be, but I'd just be interested to know from them. And my final question, Chairman, is because it's not in the report there, is my understanding is, and I realise it's out with the any authority or powers or influence necessarily of this committee, but my understanding is that there's a number of local residents who have been seeking a judicial review of this matter and have been granted judicial review in the High Court, but I guess they probably got to raise some money or something like that. I don't know, but I'd be interested to know that I haven't heard anything about that other than some publicity about 2 months or so ago, and I wondered if anybody knew where we were or where they are with the latest situation regarding their progress on the judicial review challenge to the nitrate mitigation policy that we're following. So there's a number of questions there, Chairman. I wonder if anybody could enlighten me. Thank you.
Piles of questions there, Stephen. Let me just start, probably one fairly simple one, hopefully, and just ask Claire whether she can comment. You did ask about the planning officer group meetings, Claire chairs. So maybe Claire can just enlighten us as to whether Mr. Jenrick or one of his acolytes or people in his department come along and attend those meetings. So perhaps you can answer that very simple one, Claire.
Certainly, Mr. Jenrick certainly hasn't been to the meetings, but representatives from MHCLG and DEFRA have attended recent meetings. I don't think they attended our last meeting, but they are regular attendees and give us regular updates on their work.
Okay, that's really useful, thank you. And David, on the other points, and I don't know whether the officers want to comment on the judicial review issues, which of course are in Fareham, but if you don't, I certainly will.
Okay.
Stephen's other comments.
Thank you, Chairman. If I try and answer part of the question, I may pass to Simon for the question on the online trading platform, because I think Simon's been engaged with DEFRA officials on that issue specifically, and I'd be happy if you're willing to answer the question on the judicial review aspect, because it is a matter for Fareham primarily. I have a little information, but not a lot of detail on that. With regard to the east and west issue, essentially we're in the hands of Natural England's advice, which, whilst it's true that all discharges ultimately do end up to the Solent comprises a number of water bodies within it and a number of different international designations within it. And essentially the approach which the Natural England advice follows is on a basis of catchment areas and catchment boundaries. And whilst some of those catchments are considered together, for example, the test and the itching, essentially you need to provide mitigation within the same defined catchment area as the development site. So that does restrict on an east-west aspect, and it also restricts some authorities such as Test Valley and Winchester, who aren't able to use land on the other side of the Solent on the Isle of Wight. So that is always been the case in terms of the guidance, but it's because of this further work which has been undertaken where Simon is now trying to articulate what potential mitigation land is available where, and for which local authorities and locations within them that would be available to. I think the other question, I think I've nothing really to add to say. Claire answered that about the engagement with civil servants. I think certainly whilst the housing issues are in the hands of MCLG, the tools to finding solutions have been in the hands of DEFRA, and that's essentially why perhaps there's been more engagement on that side in trying to get us support to find solutions. But we do continue to engage with MCLG on the issues of housing supply and delivery as well.
Okay, thank you for that. Hopefully that's covered the points you wanted covered, Stephen.
And if I may, Chair,
Who's that?
Sorry, if I may, Chair, could I answer the question with regards to the DEFRA projects and indeed the number of key considerations? I think it's fair to say that the DEFRA project is still very much in its inception stage, and they have still not considered a number of items in full that would be required for that trading platform to be effective, including the legal mechanism to ensure that the land is kept in perpetuity or is accounted for accordingly if they're going to have a cyclical pattern of land use management. Also, the cost and the ability to direct sites for further environmental gain, i.e. how do they stop a race to the bottom in terms of the value of mitigation land. I believe I heard somebody earlier talking about essentially farmers trying to get rid of their most unproductive marginal land that may not be in the best position, and the trading platform has yet to come up with an effective mechanism for that. That being said, work is continuing on the trading platform. They're just about to go into procurement of the trading platform provider, as well as a company that would look to potentially audit the system over time. However, they have not looked at anything on this scale previously, and there is still a number of key mechanisms that they're going to have to come up to answers for in order to serve the needs of the local planning authorities, primarily in order to make sure that this is being done in the most effective and best way.
Okay, thank you very much. And then the last point was about judicial reviews, and yeah, I can confirm that there are two going on in Fareham on two decisions which the council has made, and if you want any legal advice on what's actually happening there, then it's something that can be given privately by the solicitor to Push, who is also the solicitor to Fareham Borough Council. But yeah, so apparently what happens is you have nobody has won a judicial review or anything like that. What has happened is that there is leave to apply for judicial review, and I believe that means that a judge somewhere has decided that certain points are arguable, and so we can go into that if you wanted to with a solicitor afterwards. Any other points or questions anybody would like to raise? Okay, then on that basis we'll bring the meeting to a close. If you agree, we just note that update on the nitrate situation. And now if people would just like to hang on for a few moments while I ask Sam or Astra to bring the broadcast to a close. Before you
do that, Chairman, I think it's customary at the end of the municipal year to thank the chairman of the meeting, and I think all of us would probably agree. And I know you've been doing this for a very long time, and a very adept and a very professional way in which you've chaired this group over the last 12 months. Can I say on behalf of the other members of the committee, thank you very much for the way in which you conducted the business over the last year. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Stephen. You can definitely stop the broadcast now, Sam.
Thank you, Chairman. We'll confirm once that's finished.